following stories I have personally investigated. These stories have been brought to me by family, friends, and other acquaintances I have made over the years. I have always been fascinated with the paranormal, alien encounters, and any unexplained stories such as the Dogman or Bigfoot legends. This channel will be bringing you hundreds of stories I have been told and investigated over the years. We'll begin with story number 1, an alien encounter just outside of Hale, Michigan. My friend Tony had just left my house to walk home through the wooded trails back to his house. It was already dark outside and about 7:30 at night. We lived in a small country town, and we were close to town, yet in a very thick wooded area. We had walked that trail 1,000 times and knew it like the back of our hands. Note that the year this happened was 1985, so we didn't have cell phones, nor did we carry cameras with us. The time of year was winter, and the ground was covered in snow and the moon was full, so visibility was brighter than usual, and the moonlight brightened up the night, reflecting off the freshly snow-covered forest ground up to the clear midnight blue sky. The trees were bare, and it was quite brisk outside. I remember sticking my head out the door and telling Tony I would see him the next day in school and feeling the freeze hit my nostrils, almost like they were going to freeze shut instantly. Tony was not in school the next day, so immediately after school I went to Tony's house, walking along the same trail. I could see his footprints still in the ice-covered snow. I did notice something odd about halfway to Tony's house. I observed a second set of prints coming from a different direction up to his. They were much smaller, and I could not tell if it were bipedal or not. I'm not much of an outdoorsman or a tracker and didn't think much of it, and continued down the trail. Upon arriving at Tony's house, I seen him sitting on his front porch. He looked very perplexed and didn't appear to be himself at all. Tony looked up at me and said, "You're not going to believe what I saw last night in the woods." I replied, "What was it, dude?" He began to tell me the story and sworn me to secrecy as I nodded, of course. He continued to explain how bright the night seemed as he crossed the creek on the little wooden bridge, a bridge we built a couple years earlier at the bottom of a small hill that led into the thicker part of the woods. He told me it began to get darker as he went along, not like normal darkness, as the woods were just bright from the moonlight moments earlier. He said it was hard to explain, but it was like the darkness was folding in on him as he noticed a very large object floating just above the trees, slightly to the right and behind him, and moving pretty much just at his pace. When he stopped, it would stop. It was a dark object and could barely make it out. Tony explained it seemed like a cylinder shape, but dark like a shadow. As he continued, he could not handle the lingering fear that was growing in the pit of his stomach. He knew what he was seeing was not normal, possibly not even of this world. As the crunch of his footsteps sped up, so did the object, and he started to notice a hum above him. The hum began to vibrate down to the ground. He said he could feel a pulse of sorts moving through his body from head to toe, and somehow felt it going into the ground, into more of a buzz, almost if he were next to a power line. He said it started to feel like a very powerful wave of static electricity flowing through him. And at this point, Tony felt his life was in peril, and he decided it was time to run. And as fast as he could, Tony began to sprint. The object stayed the exact distance from him as he ran. It moved steadily, lingering above the tree line. Tony began to breathe deep, sucking in very cold air. He had to stop to catch his breath after running hard for about 10 minutes or so. He turned and he stood his ground and he stared at the object as he wanted to buy some time before he ran again. The object was moving closer now, getting almost directly above him, and he could make it out better at this point. It appeared to be metallic. He remembered he had a very bright flashlight in his coat pocket. Tony slowly pulled out the flashlight, and as he pointed it directly at the object in the sky, he turned the flashlight on, as it was now only 20 feet or so directly above him. He got a glimpse of the ship. He said it was a bluish gray in color and got a glimpse of what appeared to be drawings engraved on the metal. He said it looked like something from an Egyptian painting he had seen in a book or on TV. He panicked and quickly turned around to continue to flee the area, and there it was, directly in front of him. What he would assume is an alien, a gray alien. His light flashed in its deep black eyes. Tony froze right there, and then, not certain if it was fear or the being was preventing him from moving, he said the alien raised its hand in front of Tony's face, and the next thing he knew, he was waking up in bed. Funny thing is, Tony said when he woke up this morning, he knew where they came from. He also knew things like they were referred to as the Zeta Reticulans. He explained he knew more than he wished he knew. We never spoke of it since, and I didn't walk that trail ever again. I don't want to experience what Tony did, and God knows what unspeakable things they could have done to him. He never said anything further about it, and I have never asked for more details. Today, almost 39 years later, I live out west in the desert, and when I travel some of the lonely, dark highways at night, I keep my eyes to the sky, scanning and praying I never encounter the Greys. Story number 2. Large creature encounter while camping on the Ausable River in Michigan. The year was 1983. My friend Greg and I decided to take a camping trip, which we decided we would do every year until we graduated high school. At the time, we were 14 years old, and our parents agreed we were mature enough and savvy when it came to being out alone in the woods. We both grew up with families that raised us hunting deer, fishing on the rivers and creeks of Iosco County in mid-Michigan. We'd start our trip in Mayo and work our way down to Oscoda to the mouth of the Ausable that fed into Lake Huron. I remember that morning my mom dropping us off in Mayo and waving as we launched our canoe, which was full of all kinds of gear, as we made sure we were well prepared for a couple days on the river alone. No cell phones back then, but, we have canoed the Ausable several times with our families and very familiar with the river. We were nothing but excited and confident this was going to be the beginning of an annual thing we both would enjoy. Little did we know we were going to experience on this trip, an experience that would impact our lives forever. We have decided to do it on a long weekend from school during the fall. I remember the trees were in full bloom along the river. The air was a little brisk, but the skies, they were clear, and the sun was shining bright. We fished, and the sun was about to set when we came to a nice area along the river. Looked like it would be a perfect camping spot. It was just past an area known as the High Banks, I believe near campsite 001D. The site was perfect, and we had a slew of fish to fry for the evening. We got our tent set up just before dusk. We set up a nice campfire, started to clean our catch from the day. I began to have an uneasy feeling at this time, as though we were being watched. It made me stand up and scan the area. No one was around, and never seen another soul as far as any time on our trip that day. I remember Greg asking me what was wrong. I just thought I heard something. Greg brushed it off and said it was probably a deer or something. He was sure not too many people would be out there on the river during the fall, and I agreed. We continued to enjoy our riverside fish fry and settled up for the night. We sat by the fire and decided we would let it die down before we would hit the hay for the evening and get an early start in the morning. We packed the cooler and put in the canoe, actually, and hung the food we had up in a tree away from the tent. Growing up, we both seen plenty of black bears along the Ausable River and wanted to avoid any dealings we'd have with a bear. Greg was already in the tent as I finished putting the fire out, and suddenly I was taken back by one of the worst odors ever. It smelled like something was decaying nearby, like a rotten, pungent smell. I couldn't stand the stench. I have never experienced this before. My hair stood up on my neck and arms like I was being watched, like possibly something was about to attack me. I was spooked to say the least. I called out to Greg. I said, "Do you smell that?" Greg replied yes. He exited the tent, standing up and trying to look around. He pulled out a flashlight, lit up the tree line, yelled, "Did you see that?" I about jumped out of my skin from his excitement. I missed it, though. "What? See what?" I replied. "Over there. I just seen something step into the woods. Must have been a bear." I asked what it looked like. I asked nervously. Just fur, like a bear." "Had to be a bear for sure," Greg replied. "Probably got into some garbage. That must be the stench we smell. We should be fine. We probably spooked it off. Let's get some sleep and head out early tomorrow." Just as Greg finished saying that, a loud, blood-curdling roar came from the woods. Then 3 limbs began to break and crack. Not sticks or twigs, but tree limbs. I replied, "I'm not going to get any sleep tonight after that." "And why in God's name didn't we bring a rifle along?" "Yeah, not good," Greg replied. I suggested to Greg maybe we should move a little further down the river, away from whatever made that noise. Greg made a good point, stating we have ourselves spooked over a bear for sure, and it was dark and probably not a good idea to try to gather up all our gear and start canoeing down the river at this time of night. I somewhat agreed with hesitation, but whatever it was had stopped rampaging through the woods. It was silent now. I did notice there was an eerie silence, but we decided to light the fire back up and leave it built up for some time while we'll try to get some sleep in the tent. The night seemed still, no wind, no sounds whatsoever, just dead silence. It made both of us uneasy. It was hard to sleep, but finally I dozed off. And I'm not sure what time it was, but I was woken by Greg. He whispered, "There's something walking around outside our tent." I went to ask what, but he put his finger up to his mouth to shush me. He pointed in the direction of the fire. There was a shadow cast upon our tent of something large, on 2 legs, standing upright. I just about pissed myself when it growled a low, grumbling growl. Then loud whoops started from further off into the woods, and whatever it was standing outside our tent, between us and the fire that was dying, whooped back as to answer it. This went on for a good 20 minutes. We were frozen, hoping whatever these things were would not decide to investigate us or the tent. But then the beast moved closer to the tent. It swiped its hand down the side of the tent. You could tell it was a hand, a very large hand, not a bear paw. It walked away, and we could hear the second one investigating and moving the canoe around. The first one sounded like it was tearing our food from the tree. Then after a good 30 minutes, it went completely silent. Stayed silent for 2 hours until the sun started to rise again. We worked up our courage to exit the tent to find a complete mess of all our gear. The food was all gone, and as we walked down toward the canoe, we noticed it was completely bent and twisted. Unbelievable. What could do such a thing? It was thrown onto the shore as well. Greg looked at me completely dumbfounded. "Well, we might as well start walking out of here." It took nearly the whole day, as the night was falling upon us by the time we made it to a small town of Curtisville. We were silent during the whole walk out of those woods. We did talk after, and we found out that we were both pretty sure we were being followed for miles walking out of there. We never went again until about 2 years later. We never seen a thing, and we only went for the morning until dusk. We never camped on the Ausable since. Story number 3. A man experiences a ghostly encounter while vacationing in Ireland. During one of the seminars that I was scheduled to speak at on the subject of paranormal activity, I was approached by an odd individual named Russell. Russell asked if I would have time to listen to one of his experiences with ghosts. I was extremely glad I agreed, as Russell is one of the few people I have the pleasure of now knowing that has experiences on a regular basis with ghosts. I met with Russell that afternoon, and he explained to me that he had had experiences since he was a small boy, and had his first ghostly visitor on a horse ranch he was visiting with his grandmother. But we'll save that story for episode 2. And if we are lucky enough, we'll have Russell tell that story himself, as he has now joined our investigative team. Now on with Russell's experience in Ireland. Russell had decided to take a long-awaited trip to Ireland with some family members for a vacation and to visit other family and friends while there. One morning, a group of them decided to go visit the countryside and some family grave sites at a nearby cemetery. They were all standing around the car chit-chatting, and Russell had decided to wander off and enjoy the beautiful Irish landscape. As he approached the far end of the cemetery, looking out at a nearby canal, an older, distinguished-looking gentleman startled Russ from behind. Russell thought to himself, where the heck did this guy come from? Russell had just walked down this path, no trees, nothing that would have kept anyone from his sight. Anyway, Russell greeted the old man, and the old man sat on a nearby bench and motioned for Russell to have a seat next to him. Russell did. "Beautiful day, don't you think?" Russell asked. The old man looked at Russell and smiled. The old man then asked Russell, "Do you believe in ghosts?" Russell replied, "Well, yes, I do. I have met a few over the years." The old man said, "I'm Mr. O'Riordan, and I'm the groundskeeper here, and I see ghosts walking all over the place." "Go figure," as the old man chuckled. "It's a cemetery." Russell laughed and came back with, "Agreed. Seems like a fitting place to meet one or two. My name is..." Just then, as Russell was going to introduce himself, he was cut off from a voice in the distance. As he turned away to see, it was his ex-wife Margaret, calling him to come back to the group. Russell turned back towards Mr. O'Riordan, but to Russell's surprise, the man was gone, nowhere to be seen. When Russell reunited with his family and friends, they laughed, asking, "Do you talk to yourself all the time?" "No, why?" Russell laughed. "Well, we seen you over there on the bench carrying on a conversation, and you appeared to be laughing at yourself." No, I was just talking with the groundskeeper, Mr. O'Riordan." At that point, everyone went a little pale. They informed Russell that that was impossible. Mr. Riordan had passed away over 20 years ago. Do you believe in ghosts? Many people do, and some even believe in the legend of Bigfoot and aliens as well. So if you do, please join us every week as we pass along the stories we are told by real people who have had very real experiences. If you wish to share a story, please subscribe to us. Hit that thumbs up button and get at us with your story so we can share yours too. Thanks and stay safe.